And what's up? Welcome in. It is GC Live, of course, presented every single day by our good friend Clint Hammond of the Mortgage Network. And I tell you what, man, we tell you every single day about Clint, but there is a reason for that. Is because Clint is the best in the business. The NMLS number, which is something that I finally have gotten comfortable saying. For some reason, NMLS is the worst thing in the world for me to try to say. I have no idea why. So 71597 is it. I still don't completely know what that means. I just know I'm supposed to say it. 803-771-6933 is the phone number. And as you see right there on your screen, chammond@mortgagenetwork.com is the email address. Or, Clint's big time, man. You can just type in his name and put .com after it. ClintHammond.com to find more information about Clint. And Chris, want to give a quick shout out to our friends at Goings Law Firm as well. Robert Goings, Chris Pascal, who we had lunch with today, also are big fans of Clint Hammond, I hear. So, yeah, dude, I'm telling you, and Goings Law Firm, of course, a major sponsor of ours on GamecockCentral.com. So shout out to all those people. It is funny. Have y'all ever noticed Columbia is like right, I grew up in a very small town, man. So when I moved to Columbia to go to college, I was like, man, there's stuff everywhere. Like this is big. Well, you ever notice if you were in Columbia long enough, about everybody sort of kind of knows everybody? Like maybe not knows everybody, but everybody knows somebody that knows somebody else, basically. So it's kind of like everybody, it's not 6 degrees of separation. It's like 2 degrees of separation for everybody in Columbia, South Carolina. So all of you in the comments, we know you as well, and we are happy that you are here. Good afternoon, and welcome into GC Live, the Wednesday episode of the show, which, Chris, as I think we've settled into the year, has become the coordinator day, because on Wednesdays, South Carolina's coordinators often speak, and this is new. This is still good. I'm loving it. This is something we haven't had before, at least for 5 years there. So we got to hear from Marcus Satterfield today. We got to hear from Clayton White today, and you and I were talking a little bit before we came on air, man. It's kind of interesting. I obviously, for a reason, I did the title of the show, Satterfield Weighs In on Offense, because, our man Clayton White, he's getting to handle some softballs. It's like, hey, man, how does it feel to have your defense play this well? How does it feel to have Jalen Foster, a former walk-on, tied for the country's lead in interceptions? What have you liked about your defense? What do you want to see him improve on a little bit? Marcus Satterfield gets up there. Why can't you run the football? Why can't you get the ball to your playmakers? What's your identity? And again, obviously, as we've talked about, very valid questions, but a completely different mood or tone with the questions because of the outcomes of those 2 units through 4 games. So we're going to dive into some of Marcus Satterfield's comments. Actually, very quickly, Chris clipped some that I thought were the most pertinent. And I will say this, man. Some people are going to roll their eyes. Some people are going to say, we don't care about that. Some people are going to say, win football games and score touchdowns. And that's fine. I will say this. Marcus Satterfield stood there. He took every single question. He did not appear to get frustrated with the questions. He did not get defensive about the questions about his offense. If anything, there's one answer in particular, maybe a couple of them, where you could tell he's as frustrated as anybody. Now he's being positive. He's giving actual answers. He's not sort of backing off of questions. But let's go sort of big picture first. And then, like I said, I've actually got several comments. So what I was going to do, Chris, I'm going to play them, and then we're going to dive into each topic, because he answered several things that we've talked about here on the show. But in general, first thought was sometimes coaches get defensive. Sometimes they're like, how dare you ask me these questions? I thought he took what were pretty valid questions, even if, and I'll just say us, like even if media people get a little bit asking the same crap over and over and over again, it's like, how many different ways can he say it? But he stood in there, answered them, and tried to give actual information as well. So you know what? Offense has not been good, but I respect the handling of that so far, man.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, from top down, look, one of the things, and part of it was when things were going bad under Will Muschamp, right? That's when the media stuff gets kicked up more. If a guy's winning, him saying something in a press conference, no matter what it is, if he's not saying enough or whatever it may be, that's just kind of a footnote. Like if the team's winning, nobody really cares. Now, when things are going poorly, that's when people and fans hyper focus in on what's being said in the press conference, right? Well, what's the explanation? Why are we not hearing from this person? Why is he not answering this question? And so I think it's a positive that we get to hear from the coordinators every Wednesday, win or loss. It's scheduled. We're going to hear from Clayton White. We're going to hear from Marcus Satterfield most of the time. We're going to hear from Pete Limbo, who we heard from today. That was something that Shane Beamer wanted to do, which I think is a good idea. And I agree with you. Look, it doesn't matter what he says in a press conference. At the end of the day, it is about production. Nobody's going to grade this coaching staff or grade the program based on how well they do in a press conference setting. But it is certainly good when the fan base says that they want coaches to hold themselves accountable or they want to hear from the coaches. Well, we do get to hear from them. And I think the way that they've answered the questions, Shane Beamer, Marcus Satterfield, they have been very honest, open, and they've been very much willing to fall on the sword, so to speak, and put blame on themselves and that we have to be better. But they've given some actual info. It's not just been, yeah, we know it's bad, we're going to get it fixed, and stuff like that. There have been versions of that, but they've certainly given more detail than that. And I think Satterfield multiple times today, put blame on himself and also gave some practical solutions in terms of where they could go, and also what he saw that happen. So I think that's good because we've talked about this a lot last year, Wes, and in the past. When you aren't hearing from certain coaches, especially the coordinators, or if the head coach isn't answering questions, being kind of defensive, like you said, or leaving the press conference like we've seen at other schools or whatever it may be, all that does is open up things to like conspiracy theories and, well, this must be what's happening. And so if nothing else, it does help clear the air about certain things. And so I think having these press sessions is a positive. Will it fix the offense? No, it will not. But it is good to hear, what has happened and maybe some ways that they're looking at least to get it fixed.
Well, I think, Chris, people will fill in the blanks if you don't do it for them.
Precisely.
Like if you don't fill the empty space, people will fill it. Just like if you're talking to somebody and you have awkward silence, it's actually a tactic people use too. If they're trying to get information from someone, you just don't talk, and then people will awkwardly fill the silence. Well, people will fill the void with their opinion on why it's going, the way it is. So at least, when you speak for, yourself and your decisions and all that stuff, to me, sometimes it's almost a disservice to the coordinators. Not that any football coach like loves the whole media press conference aspect, right? You didn't sign up to be a football coach to go talk to the media. Let's be honest. But, to be able to explain yourself is an important aspect of this, in my opinion. So, yeah, I've been very happy, as I've said before, with this aspect being back. SC Scout Guy says, everybody hit the like button. I agree. And because you said that, I'm going to answer your first question. Why does Clowney always get the first question? This is not a conspiracy. There's actually no real information behind it. Y'all want to know why? Because Clowney raises his hand first. Like when it's time for the press conference to start, he puts his hand up, the mic goes to him. There's really, there's no actual basis or background to that. If somebody else wants to slide in first, it's there for the taking.
I don't think anybody even like tries to like, I'm gonna beat him out, because they just kind of know, all right, well, David will get the first one, and then when I'll be second or third or whatever. I think they just do that. You know, why people have also asked why he wants to get the first question. I don't know. Just Clowney's style. That's just what he's doing.
Yeah, that's
Living
him.
his life. Yeah.
Let's see. Matt Owen said Juju says Satterfield is a mastermind. And you know what, Matt? Marcus Satterfield is an extremely intelligent guy. Like, no, just because the offense and there was no context to your comment. There was no context to your comment, Matt. So I don't know if you were saying that like kind of rolling your eyes, or if you were saying that pointing it out. I don't know exactly, which side you were on that. But everybody you talk to will tell you, the guy is a sharp guy. Now the offense has not churned out the way anyone has expected at this point. Is it a thing at some point, Chris, where the guys start getting more comfortable? Something positive happens. They start getting more confident. It snowballs, and then the offense gets going. It's a first year. It's a first year for all these guys in this scheme. Nobody on this show is saying the offense is as good as it needs to be, or as good as anybody over there wants it to be. So I'm not even defending that through 4 games, but I also am not ready to go as far as to say the offense through 4 games is what it's going to be in even game 5, game 6, game 8, down the line. So seasons are always roller coasters, man. And just when you think you have them figured out, just when you think a team is like static and you have that team figured out, we realize that teams are not static. They're dynamic. They get better. They get worse. They have injuries. They have guys stepping up. They have guys whose girlfriend breaks up with them, and they have 3 bad games in a row. So you never know what's going to happen in a season. As I said, we have several different quotes, comments, and concerns, I guess you could say, from Marcus Satterfield. And here is our first one on South Carolina's running game.
I think it's a combination. I'm going to try to answer this because I know it's so painful. You watch it. I could imagine my dad yelling at me about the run game. So I'm trying to answer this in a way that gives you information. Like, we're not running the ball the way that we should, obviously. Do we have the personnel to run the runs we're running? 100% we do. Will the run game get a little better as the quarterbacks get healthy? Probably. I think it's like the other night we had there was 2 or 3 runs where the backfield timing and just a certain angle on we pushed the running back just a little bit, and he couldn't get behind the double team, and it ended up being a 1-yard gain as opposed to a 6-yard, like little things like that. Some of it's the O-line, some of it's the play call, some of it this time this position group didn't do what they were supposed to do, and then the next time this position group didn't do it, and it's just all little layers and pebbles and nuggets of just little things that drive you absolutely insane that it's not cohesive yet. So we keep addressing it, and we're going to tirelessly keep addressing it, and eventually it's going to get going. We got really good running backs, and I think that our offensive line they've had 2 good weeks really since Georgia. They've had their best week this week, so I get the question 100%. I ask myself that every day, and it's driving me nuts, but we're going to get it. We'll get it.
So, Chris, Satterfield sounds that just the expression, just the way he said, the way he answered that. I don't know, man. I kind of related to it. It wasn't like I'm gonna sit here and be a coach and like build this wall. Like, I'm the coach. I sit up here. I have all the answers. You morons don't know what you're talking about. It was more like, I get it. I get it. Guys, it sucks watching it for me just as much as it does for you as far as how it's played out. So that was, what I was talking about to start. I sort of understand now. I think to his point, some of this fix is probably not going to be, man, they're not going to just throw this scheme out and start running the triple option or something. Like, it's going to be a situation where maybe some of those little things we aren't quite privy to noticing slowly start to work themselves out, and this thing can get going a little bit.
Yeah, and it is. A lot of people are not wanting to hear right now that it's several different things. I mean, we've been talking about this on the show a good bit. They just want to hear, well, the play calling sucks, or, well, the O-line sucks. And like, those things can be true. Like, to some degree, that's in the eye of the beholder. Like, there becomes an objective reality to the offense is not good, right? And it has not been after the first 4 games. It has not been good enough. It has not been up to par. It has not maximized the potential of this offense, not even based on what we think it could be, but in the run game, based on what we know they've produced in the past, albeit in a different scheme, right? Albeit with Sedarius Hutcherson on the offensive line as well, albeit with Kevin Harris not coming off of an off-season surgery and working his way back in, missing the first game, and all those different types of things, right? But there should be more production. But you do, I mean, that's the reason that you have the press conference. If you want to have a press conference, if you want to hear from the coach, if you want to analyze the game, if we want to talk about it on this show and break it down on GamecockCentral.com, it's not just, well, this is bad. Okay, well, let's talk about and figure out why. And, credit to Satterfield for trying to give some information other than just being, clearly there's some frustration, maybe some exasperation there because he wants to get it fixed too. Whether or not they do it, we'll see. But he is right. I mean, you can go back and watch the games, especially against Kentucky. You can see all these little things. You can see the nose guard holding up Jalen Nichols on a pull, and then Harris running up in there, and when Nichols is supposed to be in front of him on the pull, like you can see that. So, all right, coach, how to fix that? You can see some false steps. I mean, you remember the Luke Doty play where it looked like the timing was off, and he had to flip the ball out to Juju instead of handing it to him. Ended up being a loss on that play. You got to play like that. There's a lot of little things that they've done. Now, sometimes they've just gotten beat, and that's the ones that are probably more concerning. The key is going to be whether or not they can clean up some of these smaller issues that have led to much bigger things, this season. Small margin of error, right, for this team. So when you have those things, it's going to be magnified on a team like this that does have some offensive limitations.
Craig, rightfully so, says doesn't help that Doty, Cam Smith, Marshawn Lloyd, and Kevin Harris were all hurt in the offseason to start the season. Agreed, 100%, man. I mean, nobody's making excuses. There was another comment that said there's an expiration date on saying that it just hasn't meshed together yet. Agree 100%. Justin said that on YouTube. Agree 100%, man. At some point, it's kind of one of those things we can talk about execution versus play calling. And Sat gets to a point later on. And, Chris, I think you made this point. Maybe we've talked about it on here. I know you talked about it on your Insider Report on Monday. There were some good calls in this game as far as if you're talking about play calling from a literal play calling standpoint. When I think of play calling, Chris, I think of, does this play work against this defensive call? Now, when you get when you dial it back a little bit, zoom out a little bit, ultimately execution is about, to me, I first asked myself this question. Do they have the ability to execute this? Is it just purely a talent, like they just can't do it type thing? Or is it that for whatever reason, the coaches have not prepared them to execute something? So ultimately, will execution eventually, he's talking about that expiration date. Ultimately, does it fall on the coaches to put the guys in a position to execute? Yes. We are still, 4 games in, to me, we're right. So we're still sort of in that little first part where you can make those arguments, right? To Justin on YouTube's point, yes, there does become a point where you say, well, that's on y'all. All right. This is something we've talked about. Identity, Chris. It's a cliche. It's way overused. Way overused. But in this case, our point has been that this is one of those cases where identity is an issue. Marcus Satterfield agrees.
I'll be honest with you. I don't think we have a true identity yet. I think that's you got 2 games with Zeb. Then you lose Zeb, and then you got Doty that comes in, who's like, again, this is not an excuse, but he practiced 11 plays in a month, which was amazing, his performance against Georgia. But I think just mix and matching the same plays, but just different personalities, trying to run the ball a certain way through camp. We felt like we could. Then we get into competition. Well, maybe we need to tweak this a little bit. I think we're constantly trying to find the right combinations and the right plays and the right personnels. and we haven't had any consistent success on offense right now. And so you don't have an identity yet. Like, our identity is we're going to be physical, tough, we're going to run the football, we're going to play action pass, utilize screen game, get the ball on the perimeter, right? Let our receivers make plays down the field. That's what we want our identity to be, but we're not there yet. That's what we're striving to get to, but not there. To answer your question, a long wind, we're not there yet, but we will get there. And I know that's easy to say, hard to do, but that's what we're here to do.
Chris, Coleman on YouTube said, it seems cliche, but does simplifying the offense and running a more basic offense get us back on track? To that, I would say not necessarily, but I do think you're onto something. That's something we have, I believe, talked about. I've certainly maybe even advocated for. And, even Beamer mentioned this week in passing the idea of simplifying things to a bit. What do you think on that, Chris, and Satterfield's comments on the identity of the offense right now?
So to take the simplifying part first, I think I recall Beamer using the term like narrowing down some things in terms of what they do. Maybe so. I think at this point for the offense, what you don't want them doing is overthinking or having to think too much. That's a bad recipe when you're struggling, when it's apparent that maybe you're not grasping things or you're not executing things correctly. That can be one thing, just one, that you can point to as far as, well, maybe you need to look at scaling back or simplifying things a little bit. And what that looks like, you got to figure that out. The defense right now, to give kind of the opposite of that, they seem to have a good understanding. They're not making tons of mistakes. Are there some? Yeah, for sure. But a lot of the defensive players have talked about playing fast, playing free. The offense isn't able to do that right now. A large part of that is because things have not been successful, right? Those two things really start to affect each other. I also think, look, you look at the run game, it's not like the run game has always been overly complex. They kept it pretty simple in the first two games, and eventually they found something that worked against ECU. They weren't running a ton of different run plays in those two ball games. Also, they run inside zone a good bit. I mean, that's not a run you think of as being super complicated, but they do need to maybe narrow some things down or simplify things in a different way. Maybe just how you're structuring things, maybe in the passing game, maybe you've got to change your base runs to some degree within reason. So I think that, that might be something to look at. The identity question in terms of what, Satterfield said, look, he rattled off a lot of things, and this is why I kind of always say your identity should be to score points. I mean, like you can do that in many different ways. Georgia Tech, when they were really good under Paul Johnson, their identity was the triple option and run points, but we've seen a bunch of other teams that could air it out and score points. You can do it different ways. And he mentioned basically everything good offensively. Be physical, run the ball, get the ball to the perimeter, take shots. Like, those are all things that you want to be as a team. I think your identity should be more of what can you do to score points. And so for this team, it's going to be about finding something that, to go back to your phrase, they can hang their hat on. It needs to be the run game. Like, that needs to be the starting point. It has not been there, and that's why this team is sitting here after 4 games, without that identity and without the type of production that they need.
Yeah, and I agree. In most cases, whenever people talk about identity, but I think that's completely just overrated. Something that's talked about, but it doesn't really have a place. But I do think when you're struggling, when things are going wrong, there is something to be said for what are you calling if everything else has gone to what? Like, what are you saying if you're down 21-0 and not a single thing has gone right and you're trying to get back, hey, this is what we do. Forget what's going on in the game. This is what we do as an offense. What are you calling? Right now, South Carolina doesn't know the answer to that. The really good offenses probably have some, handful of, whether it's a plays or concepts or philosophy, that they're going to turn to. And I think right now it's still finding what what that is. The phrase pin and pull became a regular phrase in a South Carolina fan's vernacular overnight within the last couple of years, because South Carolina, I would dare say, their identity on offense, they became sort of a pin and pull type team, a couple of years ago. And that was something they realized they could do very, very well. So now, sometimes identity is more of a big picture thing. I think it's like, to me, I look at Tennessee's offense. Their sort of identity is that they're going to spread out and go fast. I look at Lane Kiffin's offense and I say his identity is that it's going to be wide open and he's going to go for it on more fourth downs than anybody this side of the dude at PC. What's his name? Kevin Kelly? Kevin, is that right?
That's it, Kevin Kelly. Yep.
By the way, we need to get Kevin Kelly on GC Live.
Ooh, that would be a good one.
Would love to have Kevin Kelly. Kevin Kelly, if you're listening, watching, it's always open, man. We'd love to have you on. Then, Chris, when you start talking about offense, and I don't want to bore y'all to death. I feel like we've been talking about offense for 3 days straight now, because we have been. But at the same time, Troy is not an opponent that moves the needle for y'all as a fan base. So it is kind of a good time to kind of sit back, evaluate where things are. 4 games in. You're a third of the way through the regular season. How insane is that to say? So good of a time as any to sort of go into this. But the other sort of fiber in all of this, Chris, the little thing that just has been probably an issue, is the amount of time that Luke Doty had to miss, the amount of time that Kevin Harris had to miss. When we're talking about a guy being at his full strength, even with Kevin Harris, as big as breaking tackles was to his game last year, being in game shape, being in a position to where the timing is perfect. Again, not excuses, but probably a factor in all this as well. All that said, Luke Doty has really played 2, really, really good football.
I thought he played well enough for us to win the game. Was he John Elway? No, and I wasn't Bill Walsh. But he played well enough to win that game, and he threw the ball well. He put the ball in places where maybe they weren't always caught on certain and very, very high pressure down, and I think the guys will make the plays for him moving forward. But I thought he played well enough to win the game for sure. Like he didn't have any critical errors. He was locked in. He made some great decisions. He had good tempo throughout the game, and I was proud of him. Still pleased. Still for him to be performing like he is. Just practicing his first full week after playing against Georgia is really cool to watch.
So Chris, Satterfield on Luke. I agree, man. I think Doty has played really well. We've talked about it all week. We have to remember how few games Luke Doty has actually started in his career. So quarterback play has been solid. Pretty obvious he's not quite at his full speed yet as far as running speed, running ability, but has played well, man. Nick on Facebook says, isn't that concerning that you're 4 games in and you don't have an identity? Yeah. I mean, I think nobody has said it's not concerning. I think everybody from this show to even Satterfield himself, pretty much just said it's kind of concerning.
Yeah, I mean, he did. And that's kind of how he was answering the question. And that was the tone of the entire press conference, is that there was nothing that he said. I mean, he did express some optimism that, hey, we'll get there. We'll get better. We'll get these things corrected. And maybe some people roll their eyes. But what's he going to say? Guys, I just don't think we'll get there. This is a lost cause. He's not going to say that. As a coach, your job is to instill some confidence. I mean, you even hear the comment he said, Luke put the ball some places. Guys didn't come up with the plays, but they'll make the plays for him in the future. I mean, those are the types of things that you're going to hear from a coach, and really you should hear that. I mean, you don't want a coach going up there and saying, I just don't think our guys can do it. What good does that do, besides validating somebody's opinion maybe? I mean, it's not going to do any good. So I think the whole tone of his answer in that question and the rest of the press conference kind of showed that, no, they don't have an identity. That's why he said, I'm going to be honest, we don't have one right now. And he kind of laid out why. So, of course, that's something they want to establish. He pointed out the markers that they wanted to hit. Again, it's all the things that you want to be able to do offensively. You want to be able to, somebody mentioned in the chat, why did he mention play, action, pass? He was saying that's what they want to be able to do. And to do that, obviously, you do have to establish the run. So he established the markers while saying that, hey, we're not there yet. So, yeah, he's expressed concern, and everybody, I think, has expressed concern.
Craig says, I will say Beamer has his pulse on what's being said about the program. I think he wants us to know that. I agree, Chris. I think Beamer 100% has his finger on the pulse of what the fan base is saying. So, I think he's noticed the comments after the 2-2 start. And we talked about it earlier this week, y'all. I believe if South Carolina, if the offense wasn't playing the way it is right now, and the results were still 2-2, maybe a little different conversation from a lot of people, just because I believe that the fact the Kentucky game was not just winnable on paper, but was so winnable in the fact that your defense gave you those opportunities, probably just bothers people a little bit. Probably just is a little bit more annoying to fans than if it had played out a little bit differently. One final quote from Sat here, and then we're going to move on from this offensive talk, and we're going to dive heavily into Troy a little bit at the end of this show. And then, of course, as we finish out the week, we'll let you know all about what you need to know about the Troy Trojans.
I'm usually really hard on myself. This last game, which was our worst game, ironically enough, I walked out of the thing feeling like I was good with all the decisions that I made and the plays that were called. We just have to everybody get on the same page and get the execution level where it needs to be. Obviously, we're want to be way more productive and have 500 yards of offense and stay on the field for longer and rush for 4.2 yards, and we're not getting that done. So, as a coach, like, you're constantly critiquing yourself of that's my fault, and it is my fault. But I would say right now, I would give myself as a real human in this world, I'd give myself probably a C-. Knowing though, I would give myself the benefit of the doubt that I would get that worked up rather quickly, sooner rather than later.
So again, that's our final quote there from Satterfield. You got? I don't have anything else to add on that, Chris. You got anything else?
Well, my 2 points I did want to make, Wes, briefly. Satterfield grading himself, that was interesting. What would you grade yourself this week, Wes? Would you be a C-? Would you be an A? Maybe I need to do that more. I thought that was kind of interesting to be able to give an answer and to give a C-. It's not a great grade. But the bigger point, though, I think that he made was, I think some people may hear what he said. Well, how could he walk away from the Kentucky game and feel good about the calls he made? They scored 10 points. They didn't run the ball. They didn't. But there's several different aspects of coaching, and one of them is what you said earlier, literally the play calls. Is the play against whatever defense is called, does it give the players a chance to be successful? Does it scheme some players open? Does it make sense against the given call in the run game? You can feel good about that and not have production. If you have, let's say you got a team that's got tons of talent. Let's say I'm the OC at Alabama and we're playing whoever, somebody not good. Like, I could go out there, and if you gave me base calls and kind of gave me a decent concept of what each one is, I might be able to put a half decent game plan together, right? Not going to be great. I'm going to probably make that team look a lot worse because I'm not an OC. But I could call some plays and they would work, even if it's not the right call, because the players are so good, So if you can meet great play calling, great teaching of the execution, and great players, you're going to have a winning formula. So I say all that to say the other part of coaching is not just scheming, but teaching the players how to execute things. And Satterfield, I think, expressed some frustrations, maybe even more so after Kentucky, and not just the play calling aspect, which is what everybody's going to think about, but teaching the players. Are they making the right decisions? Are we teaching the run game right? Are we hitting all the landmarks and when to hit the hole and how to hit it? Like, those are also coaching points that I think don't get talked about enough. And he seemed to be a little bit more concerned even with that after the UK game. So that was just a quick point that was not quick that I wanted to make on that one.
Yeah, no doubt, man. So moving on, let's get to Troy. We are working on. I believe we're gonna be able to have a Troy beat writer for y'all tomorrow. There's not a Troy Rivals site that I'm aware of. So, we shall have someone, we believe, at some point this week, probably tomorrow, to talk to y'all a little bit about Troy, because I don't know, man. I normally by now have had a chance to dive into the opponent. I have not taken the leap yet, but I can tell you this: pretty darn good defense, man. Which is interesting. Is it not interesting how many coaches are defensive coaches, and then maybe their defense struggles when they're head coaches, or they're offensive minded dudes? They're like a former OC. Chip Lindsey is a guy that I believe started out in the high school ranks. Then he was at Auburn as sort of like an off the field, like analyst type guy. Then he sort of moved around a little bit. I think spent a year at Arizona State, maybe. Spent a couple of years running the offense as much as you get to run the offense under Gus Malzahn at Auburn. And now is the head coach at Troy, and has had some, like, from what I remember, Chris, it's sort of like middling type, not awful. The bottom hasn't dropped out, but hasn't won a ton of games either at Troy. So, which I guess did he take over for Neil Brown?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. So Chip Lindsey been there, handful of years, took over for Neil Brown. And, basically, Chris, they have been really good, on defense this year. And they've kind of struggled to get going on offense.
Yeah, and that has been kind of a source of frustration, my understanding. I did do kind of some of the preseason reading, and even after the first couple games, Wes, there's been kind of some belly aching out of Troy about this season. That's what I look forward to diving into a little bit of, kind of the state of mind around that fan base and around that program when we get our Troy expert on tomorrow. This has kind of been viewed as an important season for Chip Lindsey, and with his offensive pedigree and background on that side of the ball, I think people have expected more in the way of results. But they do. I mean, Shane Beamer rattled off the statistics, defensively this year for Troy, and even some dating back to last year. And they're pretty impressive. When you look at tackles for loss, sacks, they had 9 sacks in the game. That's hard to do against anybody, right? And so defensively is where they're going to, that's kind of their bread and butter. And that's concerning for South Carolina, given their struggles on the offensive side of the ball. I mean, you again, even against EIU, which is the least talented team that South Carolina will play this year, South Carolina racked up some points, right? Not tons, but they had a pretty good offensive day. There were still some things that you came out of that game going, this could be a problem. Well, it has been a problem, and that's something that you cannot extend, to Troy this week.
Yeah, no doubt. So we'll see. I actually, in many ways, Chris, I think this is kind of a good time for South Carolina to play Troy. And my reason being is that obviously not an SEC opponent, but not an EIU either, in that you're not playing a team that is going to be quite good enough to where, if you just have some really bad moments, that they're just going to just come out and beat you. Not that Troy's not capable, because I'm going to tell all of you right now, they are capable of winning this game 100%. But gives you an opportunity. In no way am I saying this as a way of like, oh, you go out there and just mess around and throw stuff at the wall. That's not what I'm saying at all. But it gives you an opportunity to work on some things, to tweak some things against a real opponent, against a solid enough opponent that you're going to learn something, but also not an opponent that's good enough that if it just none of it works, that you're just going to get blown out, and going in, not to look ahead, but dude, going into Tennessee, which, circle that game as being the next key swing game on the schedule. that, you know, South, I said it going into last week. I'll extend it into this week. You really need to start to see some positives from this offense, from this running game that they can build off of. And I honestly, Chris, there were times, there were little just windows of the Kentucky game where I thought we were about to see the running game get going. But they still, it was like, maybe it's a 6-yard gain instead of that 16-yard gain. You know, it was not quite there. So maybe, you know, Satterfield said they had a good week going into last week. They've had an even better week this week from an O-line standpoint in practice. Maybe we start to see it this week. And I think it actually will mean something. Like it won't be the same as if you were going up against Georgia, you know, and rush for 200 yards or something. But if they're able to have a good, solid game up front, it won't mean nothing.
Yeah. I mean, some of it's going to be about production, and I think honestly, some may be just eyeball test. You know, it's going to be all right if they're in 3rd and 1. Are they blowing guys off the ball? You know, and not that they even should do that against Troy. Again, this is not EIU, but you know, are they able to mash some people at times? Are they having less of these mistakes with the steps and the angles and running into each other type things? Are they having less of that? Because those are things that, you know, the offensive team and the front and the backs, the quarterbacks, they can control those things a little bit more. And then the defense is only going to disrupt you even further from there. So control the things you can control. And if they can do that, there is enough running back talent and experience on this offensive line to where they can have a more productive performance. If we exit the Troy game and South Carolina's rushed the ball for, you know, 2 yards a carry and they have 68 rushing yards, you know, we'll be on here the next Monday on GC Live sounding the alarm again, you know, for the remainder of the season and say, I just don't know if this is going to get fixed, you know. Now, we'll see what happens. But there will be, I think, some things to take away, you know, from the performance this game. Wes, before you move on to the next point, great time. A little late on this time, but great time to tell everybody about Dead Soxy. There you see it on the screen if you're watching the live stream. Check out the fine folks at Dead Soxy. Awesome socks, buttery soft feel, patented no-slip technology, men's or women's, athletics, dress socks. I mean, any kind that you want. You can check out their college-themed socks or just browse their catalog. And when you're doing so, you can get 25% off your entire order with the promo code COCKY. That's COCKY, and that's at deadsoxy.com, which is DEADSOXY.com. Appreciate them being a part of the show here on GC Live.
Somebody said, Travis said this, somebody said it earlier, want to see Amari and Brown get more involved. I agree 100%, man. And again, some of getting more of these guys involved is just being able to stay on the field some more. By the way, I would say this: our new buddy Adam Cushing probably never going to do GC Live again, as much as we've been bashing.
I was sitting here wondering. No, I mean, and Wes, over the weekend, I think it was this past weekend,
they got a dub.
They beat Tennessee Tech, I think, by 3, right?
No. They won 28-14.
That's right. Okay, I'm thinking of a different score. Yeah, so first dub of the season, 1-4, 1-3, 1-4, I think, on the year. But congrats to EIU for getting their first win. The other one, dude, and here's one thing I've been thinking about. You know, we've had we knew we weren't going to get Kirby Smart on the show. I'll admit, didn't even try. I kept saying I was going to put in the obligatory request. I did not. We did try on Mike Houston from ECU. He was unable due to scheduling. We didn't try Mark Stoops. I don't think he would have done it. No offense to him. I don't think he would have done it. We didn't try on Chip Lindsey. Maybe we should have tried. I'm wondering if we can get Clark Lee on the show. And the reason I thought of that is because you talked about our buddy Cushing may not come on the show. Dude, if Clark Lee listens to our show, he's going to be like, guys.
No. And Clark Lee doesn't listen to our show because he's got bigger problems to deal with. But if he heard 1 second of one show, he'd be like, "Screw those guys."
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I don't think I'm doing it.
Maybe we can get the UConn coach on here. South Carolina doesn't even play UConn, but
The former UConn coach or the
well, that's who is the current for the rest of the year UConn coach.
I forgot his name. I forgot his name. But Randy Edsel, you know, when I made that joke earlier about leaving the press conference, he was one of the guys I thought of because he would just
dip out.
He would just straight up dip out. Wes, I have. You remember how I had a stat of the week earlier?
Yeah.
Sponsored by Gamecock Russ. I've got one more. It's kind of a stat of the week, but it's more.
Do you have the graphic? Do you want the graphic?
The graphic. Yeah, what's up, Gamecock Russ? Shout out. He's, of course, not listening live because of work, but he will listen to this later. So 2 stats of the week from Gamecock Russ this week, or sponsored by Gamecock Russ. Here it is. Not really a stat, but you remember yesterday I mentioned the last time that South Carolina played Troy, and I was like, I know they won. I think they won comfortably. I couldn't really remember what happened. I went back and looked it up. Do you remember anything about that game, Wes? Do any of the chatters without Googling remember anything about that game?
All right. I remember a Troy game that no, I don't know if it was this one, but I remember a Troy game where Marcus Lattimore rushed for like 100 yards and like 3 carries or something. Like it was literally it was like the freaking the splitting of the Red Sea. Like Lattimore just, I mean, it was like he was averaging 50 yards a carry and had like 3 touchdowns and 3 carries, I feel like.
So I will make – all right, first of all, it was in 2010, South Carolina's SEC East title year. The Gamecocks won 69-24. I had forgotten about this. At the time, the most points in the Spurrier era, I guess the 70-13, 70-14 beatdown of Coastal a few years later would eventually replace that. 69-24. And here's the stat of the week part. Marcus Lattimore, 7 carries, 102 yards, and 3 touchdowns by halftime. So Marcus was just able to kind of peace out after that. But DJ Swearinger had a pick 6 in that game. South Carolina was up like something like 35-0. Marcus, you know, yeah, I mean, I think he had a 17-yard touchdown, a 58-yard touchdown, a 5-yard touchdown. I mean, he just ran wild. So
yeah, that 5-yarder really kills the old average though.
It does.
That I guess is probably one of your better. You know, there have been some beatdowns now. That Coastal beatdown you're talking about was one of the most. That's one of the most lopsided beatdowns I've ever seen in my entire life. The Charleston Southern beatdown a few years ago under Muschamp was one of the most lopsided games I've ever seen. I tell you what, man, this is going to probably make people cringe because it just reminds you of things, how they are now versus then. Do you remember the South Carolina at home Kentucky beatdown when Connor was the quarterback? And Connor just freaking went off. It reminded me of a beatdown South Carolina put on Arkansas at Arkansas.
Yes.
When Brendan Nosovich scored late in the game.
That Kentucky game was something like 54, 52, 54 to like 3.
J-Rock's got it. 54-3.
Yep, that was it. Is that the one where Spurrier said Kentucky had a good punter? I think that might have been the one. And, dude, I just found another – you know what? Scrap the previous and I promise I'll let you move on. I've gone down a rabbit hole, a Troy rabbit hole. A new stat of the week, Gamecock Russ. So this will replace the other one on Marcus. This is wild. You remember Marcus Lattimore's performance against Florida in the Swamp that year. Same year, 2010, 40 carries, 212 yards, 3 touchdowns. South Carolina's team rushing total against Troy in 2010, that same year. As a team, 40 rushing attempts, 212 yards. How about that? Stat of the week, Gamecock Russ.
So you're telling us that South Carolina's running game is going to get rolling this week, is what you're telling us?
I'm not saying that, but it sure was in 2010 with Marcus Lattimore.
Yes, indeed, indeed, indeed. Let's see. I got quick comments from Clayton White. We can't leave him out. Like I said, man, though, it's like he gets the softball questions compared to the offense. But he did have some insight on Troy, what he sees from their offense. Really, I guess more from like a schematic standpoint, you would say. So here's Clayton White.
Well, they've done a good job. Coach Lindsey, they've done a great job of spreading people out. They're a spread offense, one tight end, sometimes two tight ends, but for the most part, they're going to be in a no tight end picture, and they get the ball all over the field. So we got to do a great job of matching up. We got to do a great job of defending the whole 53 1/3 of the field for its width. And our guys got to be great on understanding they have 3 or 4 good, really good running backs that they're going to try their best to find ways to run the ball. I think those guys are really good players. To me, it's just doing a great job of just understanding where we are on the field and the situation and knowing that you're going to be spread out. So we got to be great up front. We got to be great out on the perimeter.
Oh, man, Ty Adams missed the dead Soxy. Hey, we tried to wait on you, man. We actually did it way later than normal. Tried to wait, man, but you're just too late. Let's see. What else we got, man? I'm trying to look through the comments. What else do you have to say, man? I think I'm over this show at this point.
Well, and I'll say, until further notice, Wes, and this is just a general point based on what we heard from the coordinators and kind of what we've learned about Troy. We'll dive in, like you said, to a lot more Troy tomorrow and Friday on the side and here. But this is still a game where South Carolina's defense is going to need to carry the day, and it's still concerning going into this game for South Carolina with their offensive struggles and running the football, with a Troy defense who's statistically put up some good numbers and could present some problems because they play really hard. That's the type of team that if you're not meshing well up front, if you're having communication issues, that can cause a lot of negative plays. So I think this defense for South Carolina is again going to have to carry the day. And hopefully, if you're Carolina, your offense can get on track. But I think that's a storyline to continue to watch. Troy is not, again, they have not been great offensively. They've had some they've been really turnover prone. They really struggle with that in their last game. Can South Carolina continue the turnover party defensively? Maybe give your offense some short fields, and then maybe that then gives you some opportunities to build some confidence and get some points.
And they got this Javon Solomon guy on defense that is a monster off the edge. Be an interesting little test for South Carolina, with their pass pro struggles at times. Kid's an excellent pass rusher, one of those sort of undersized guys that has flown under the radar a little bit, but it is great off the edge. So that'll be something to watch. These games to me, that's sort of, you go into the second quarter, I feel like, of these games, kind of having a pretty good feel for how they're playing out. Like if you start getting to that like midway through the second quarter part and Troy's just kind of hanging around and it's a close game, then, the team that's favored maybe starts to press a little bit. Confidence starts going up on the Troy side. And that's when you find yourself in a scary ball game. So important. And I think something South Carolina has not really been able to do much of yet, Chris, would be to start fast. Like, I think this is a game where, the offense really has looked a lot better in general. Probably not the EIU game, but again, I kind of throw that out. But you look at ECU, you look first drive of the second half against Kentucky. South Carolina's been better against like sort of like talent. They've been better in the second half. So to me, very important to come up with a plan to try to get the offense going. What that looks like, do you throw to run? I know that's been a topic of discussion in the chat. Do you run to throw? How do you structure it? Who knows? But we shall see. We shall see. We'll talk about it tomorrow. We'll talk about it Friday. But yeah, important to start fast. All right, y'all. Appreciate all the chatters, all the comments, all the support. Again, if you are on YouTube, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. If you're listening on the podcast platform after the fact, we'd love to see you come and join us on YouTube, youtube.com/GamecockCentral. And we'll be back tomorrow. Once again, Go Braves. Phillies are losing tonight. Y'all have a good one.